welcome to the PI show. We're talking about personal injury law tonight. I'm with Tony Carbone.
Good evening, viewers.
And we've got a special guest, Gary Allen, who calls himself a forensic and investigating accountant. What does that mean?
Well, it means that I'm doing work that supports legal cases broadly. It's more of a marketing title more than anything else. I don't think there's any technical description.
But you provide some figures as best to try and quantify, if you like, someone who has been injured and has lost an ability to earn money.
That's right. We need to work out what a person would have earned at a point in the future. It might be 18 months, it might be several years in advance. And so I guess take some assumptions about what that person would have been doing. It might have been exactly the same as they were doing when they were injured, but it might be something different. So we try and work out what would have happened. And then once we've got that, I start trying to put some figures on that, what it means, how much they would have earned, what their expenditure would have been, because really what we're trying to do is work out what their loss of earning capacity was.
Gary, a good example would be a partnership situation between a husband and wife. Is that the classic case?
That often happens, yes, yeah. That's right.
And let's say you got both people in the partnership documents earning a similar type income, and the person that's really generating the income is the husband or wife.
Yeah.
Husband or wife.
Well, it's quite common, and what I would try and do in that situation is first of all clarify whether in fact the wife really is making a contribution, because sometimes they do in a small way, even if the husband's doing most of the work. But in most cases, you're right, the wife...
It's a splitting of income. They've probably got some advice from an accountant to say it's legal in Australia to set yourself up as a partnership. You can split income. There's nothing illegal or unusual about it. There's hundreds of thousands of partnerships throughout Australia. So one of them in the partnership gets injured, and then the lawyer has to formulate a loss of earnings, and they come to you as an expert to try and put some figures together.
Yes. Well, you're right, and as I started to say before, the first thing we're trying to do is, did the wife make any real contribution? But if we assume that she didn't, then the situation is, well, what has this person really lost? If he was the breadwinner, he was bringing all the money into the family. So what we're trying to do is establish what his economic return to the family, as it were, was going to be at some stage in the future.
So your starting point, one of the starting points would be your income tax returns. That would be a starting point. You need income tax returns. What happens in a situation where people haven't lodged tax returns in the last few years?
Sadly, sometimes it's too common.
I think Paul Keating didn't lodge a tax return for a few years.
Well, again, the end point, as it were, is what is this person's economic return for their work? The fact that they may or may not have put a tax return in ultimately shouldn't make any difference.
Well, they can always get a return prepared at any stage, can't they?
You can lodge returns retrospectively, yes.
Well, Paul Keating did it, and he was fined a small amount of money, and he just forgot. And he didn't owe the tax office any money, but he did it, late. So he was busy running Australia. But yeah, sometimes there's no tax returns to start off with, but if there is, that's probably your starting point.
If you have tax returns, it is the starting point, but it's not necessarily true that that's what your situation was going to be in several years ahead when we're trying to do this calculation. Lots of things might have happened between when you were doing those tax returns and when you were injured, and when we're trying to do our calculation, maybe several years in advance, in the future.
And also in tax returns, you probably, I assume, have got to look at what the deductions are and how they're calculated, whether they are bona fide deductions or whether they should be taken into account.
Well, it's quite clear that some things ought not to enter into your calculation of earning capacity. If you're paying a wage to your wife, for example, and she's not really making very much of a contribution, that would be considered to be a distribution of the earnings you've already earned. So you'd just be ignoring that. Another example, let's say you've had a major expense before you were injured. A truck driver's truck needs a complete overhaul. But if we're looking in the future, we can't assume that there's going to be an overhaul required every year.
That's right.
So we'd be saying, forget about that. That's not part of your ongoing and expected earning capacity in the future. So I'd be leaving that one out. Interest is another example. You might have a big loan when you're injured, but if you had anticipated that in a few years from now that loan would have been paid out, there'd be no interest. Yeah. So that could come out of your calculation of earning capacity as well. But the point, I guess, from all of those examples is that you have to look ahead and say, what would have been the situation? It's not necessarily what was in your tax returns, what was in your accounts. It's what you are really capable of earning in the future.
So, Gary, what you're saying is you'll come up with a figure for loss of income today and then extrapolate into the future. Is that correct?
Well, today is a good starting point, but you always must come back to, we're looking ahead. So what would have been the situation? Today is a good starting point, so it's not the end of the story.
Can I put this scenario to you? Assuming you say today the injured person's losing 50,000, you'd give increments, I'd imagine, every year?
Exactly. And those increments might be based upon an award. If he's under an award, it might be under an EBA. If he's under an EBA, he or she is under an EBA. You might look at comparable wages from other employees. One of the issues, of course, is overtime. A lot of people have regular overtime, so we'd be assuming that would go on in the future.
So would you also then, so you got your 50,000, your increments, and the person's 24 years of age, so you say 41 more years, 52 times 50. That's not right, is it?
No, it doesn't work that way because both under our legislation and under common law, you're required to apply a discount rate, 5% or 6% usually. And so we have to make a calculation to bring all those future earnings that you've just been talking to back to a current figure by applying a discount rate. So you don't get quite as much as you expect. Yeah, it's the present value. That's right.
It's like a mortgage going backwards. That's how I can best describe it. Is that, look, I think we're going to have to go to one of our breaks, one of the sponsors' breaks. So, look, viewers, keep watching and we'll be back very shortly.